My name is Daniel Rourke, and what I'm about to share with you changed every fiber of my being. Up until May 2nd, 2018, I was a man who trusted in blueprints, numbers, and physics. I was a structural engineer with nearly 2 decades of experience under my belt, the kind of man who measured twice and cut once, metaphorically and literally. My world was concrete and steel, not angels and eternity. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who would end up testifying about what comes after death. But what I saw during those moments, when my heart stopped and I left my body, has haunted and transformed me ever since. The day it all happened, I was doing a routine inspection on a high-rise project just outside of Denver. It was spring, and the weather was surprisingly mild for Colorado. No sudden gusts or ice patches, just a standard day. I remember climbing the temporary scaffolding to check a discrepancy we'd noticed in one of the load-bearing columns. One of my guys, Marcus, had flagged something unusual, a small hollow pocket deep within the concrete structure, hidden behind perfectly formed external slabs. It wasn't on the plans, and it wasn't visible from the surface. Only the two of us knew it existed because he'd found it by accident after dropping his wrench and seeing where it echoed. I made a note to look into it later, but I didn't get the chance. That afternoon, I slipped. I don't remember the fall. I only remember the moment I hit the ground, and then silence, deafening, blinding silence. I didn't feel pain the way I expected. Instead, I felt like I had been ripped out of my body by something invisible and magnetic. 1 minute, I was staring up at the skeleton of a building. The next, I was floating several feet above it, watching a circle of workers form around my lifeless form like ants around a fallen leaf. It was strange how calm everything looked from above. There was no panic, just motion. I saw myself, crumpled, blood pooling beneath my helmet, one leg twisted at an unnatural angle. Yet I felt no panic. In fact, I felt free. It was as if the weight I had carried my whole life, expectations, doubt, guilt, fear, had evaporated the moment I slipped the bonds of my body. I hovered there, suspended in a kind of golden gray light, watching the scene unfold like it belonged to someone else. But then I noticed something no one else could have seen. That hollow space in the column, I saw it again, clearer now. From my elevated vantage point, it stood out like a bruise beneath the skin of the building. And something told me, deep in whatever part of me was still me, that it wasn't just a flaw, it was a metaphor or a warning. I didn't understand it then, not fully, but I knew it mattered. Before I could focus on it more, the air around me shifted. At first, I thought it was a wind current, but there was no breeze, only light. A tunnel formed in front of me, not a physical tunnel made of brick or steel, but a vortex of warm light and sound, though no melody I could describe in earthly terms. It hummed with a resonance that filled my chest with something like longing and peace all at once. I felt pulled, not forced, but invited, into that corridor of radiant motion. So I entered. The transition was seamless. One moment, I was hovering above scaffolding and paramedics. The next, I was gliding through this tunnel, surrounded by colors I'd never seen before, living hues that pulsed with intention. And then, just as suddenly, I was somewhere else. It wasn't heaven. Or if it was, it wasn't a version I'd heard about growing up in Sunday school once a year when my grandmother dragged me. No pearly gates, no choirs. What I saw was vast, an expanse that felt more like consciousness than geography. The ground wasn't solid, yet I stood. The air wasn't air, yet I breathed. Time didn't seem to pass, yet things happened. And then I saw them, beings of light. They didn't have faces, not like ours, but they had identity. I don't know how else to explain it except to say I knew them, and they knew me. They radiated a kind of familiarity that made me feel at once exposed and fully embraced. They didn't speak, but they communicated directly into my thoughts, my soul. It was like telepathy, but deeper. One of them approached me, and the light intensified without burning. And then he appeared. I didn't need anyone to tell me who he was. The moment he stepped forward, I knew this was Jesus, but not the stained glass version or the pale figure from paintings. This was Jesus in glory, radiant, authoritative, yet infinitely gentle. His eyes held galaxies, and his presence carried the weight of eternity wrapped in grace. I fell to my knees. I didn't fall because I was told to. I fell because I could not. Every part of me recognized him as truth. He didn't accuse me. He didn't scold me. He simply looked at me. And in that gaze, I felt everything I'd ever done and everything I was still meant to do wash over me like a tide. He lifted me to my feet with a glance. And when he spoke, it wasn't in words. It was in essence. You've seen the structures of man, he said, but now I will show you the scaffolding of time. He reached out, and suddenly the space around us shifted. We were no longer standing in that realm of pure light. Instead, we hovered over something that looked like a cosmic scroll, an unfurling sequence of events stitched together by threads of fire and water, air and stone. It was not symbolic. It was literal and eternal. I don't know how I knew it, but I did. He pointed to a section glowing with an eerie intensity. This is May 2025, he said. And in that moment, my spirit trembled. What I saw next shattered every assumption I had ever carried about the future of humanity. Jesus stood beside me in that realm outside of time, his presence steady and sovereign. The scroll before seemed alive. It rippled like a river made of glass and fire, stretching endlessly into what I understood as history, present and future, all converging in this eternal now. He gestured again toward that glowing section, the one labeled, though not with earthly letters, May 2025. I didn't read it. I felt it. The vibration of that month pulsed with a kind of unbearable tension, as if all creation was holding its breath. Jesus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence was the message. What you're about to see, he said, is not to frighten, but to awaken. The time is near, and still many sleep. The scroll opened wider, and instantly I was immersed, not watching from the outside, but inside the vision. I stood on a city street I didn't recognize. Cars moved, people bustled. Phones were glued to hands, and everything looked normal, too normal. It was like a dream mimicking real life. But then I noticed no birds, no breeze. The air was still in a way that felt wrong. Even the sun, hanging overhead, gave off light but not warmth. And the sky, it was a color I've never seen before. Not blue, not gray, almost metallic. Something was off, deeply off. Then I heard it. It wasn't a sound in my ears. It was in my bones. A low hum, like the earth was groaning. People around me didn't react. They walked past, oblivious. I turned to a man beside me and asked, "Do you hear that?" But he didn't see me. couldn't hear me. I wasn't really there. Jesus' voice echoed again within me. This is the first sign, the stillness before the shaking. And then it began. A light, sharp and white, flashed across the horizon. Not lightning, but something higher, stranger, more intelligent. It stretched across the sky in a way that felt both celestial and spiritual, as if the very fabric of reality was being pierced. People dropped their phones. Some began crying. Others laughed nervously, thinking it was just another phenomenon. But I knew it was a veil thinning. I saw governments scrambling. Screens flashed with symbols I couldn't interpret. Broadcasts in languages I didn't know, but somehow understood. Alerts, emergency codes, then blackouts. Entire cities blinked out like dying stars. No power, no communication. But more terrifying than the darkness was the silence. That low hum returned, louder now, vibrating to the ground, the air, the soul. And I knew it was the sound of heaven drawing near, not in rage, in reckoning. And then came the second vision. I stood on a ridge overlooking vast lands, oceans, mountains, deserts, forests, all of it connected by threads of light, only visible in the spiritual plane. And then I saw them, rips in the light, places where the threads were unraveling, as if lies, greed, and pride had chewed holes through the spiritual fabric of the world. I saw structures collapse, not just buildings, but institutions, media, government, education, even churches, crumbling, not from bombs, from within, from rot. Jesus turned to me. His face was not angry, but deeply grieved. This is the second sign, he said, the collapse of what man built without me. And I understood what we thought was strength, our systems, our empires, our tech, even our theology, was hollow and severed from divine truth. We had mistaken information for wisdom, control for order, and it would all unravel, not to destroy us, to purge us, because beneath the collapse, something new would stir. Then came the third and most harrowing vision. I was transported to a place I can only describe as the border between dimensions. It was like standing on the threshold of two worlds. One, the earth as we know it, beautiful but broken. The other, a realm of blinding light and sacred fire. Between them was a great chasm, and in that space stood souls, millions of them. Some looked upward, desperate, reaching. Others turned away, seduced by darkness that whispered with sweet lies. And then I saw the choice. Each soul was being shown something, a mirror of themselves, not the version they showed the world, but who they really were. Some wept, some ran, some fell in worship. Others raged, screaming, trying to shatter the mirror, unwilling to face the truth. And over it all was a voice, not loud but final. You have seen. Now you must choose. I asked Jesus, is this the end? He looked at me with the deepest love and the deepest seriousness I have ever known. No, this is the beginning of the separation. Light from darkness, truth from deception, spirit from flesh. He showed me one last image. It was of families gathered in small homes, praying, candles lit, children sleeping while parents wept and worshipped. There was darkness outside, impossible, suffocating darkness. But inside those homes, there was peace, not because of the structure, but because of the presence within. Angels stood guard at the windows. Demons wailed outside, unable to enter. And I heard Jesus say, "Those who cling to me truly will not be shaken, but those who wear my name and deny my heart will be exposed." Suddenly, the scroll began to close. I cried out, begging to see more, but Jesus placed his hand on my chest, and I felt everything inside me stop, not in fear, but in holy stillness. He said, "Daniel, you must return. The hour is late. Speak boldly. Prepare them. May 2025 will not be what they expect, but it will be exactly what I foretold." And just like that, I felt myself being pulled backward to the tunnel of light through layers of sensation and memory. The realm of eternity faded, and I slammed back into my body with a jolt that felt like being born again. When I opened my eyes, I was in a hospital bed. Machines beeped. A nurse gasped. A doctor leaned over me, stunned. "He's back," someone whispered. "He shouldn't be, but he's back." But nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same. When I came back to the world, everything felt unfamiliar. My body was awake, but my soul had shifted. I blinked under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room as machines beeped steadily beside me. Nurses were whispering outside the curtain, and the attending doctor stared at me like he was seeing a ghost. Maybe he was, because the man who left his body on that construction site was not the one who returned. I barely spoke for the first hour, not because I didn't want to, but because words suddenly felt so small. I had just been somewhere where thought moved faster than sound, where emotion carried truth more clearly than language. How do you explain that you met Jesus? Not in a dream, not in a feeling, but in reality deeper than this one. How do you tell someone the universe is about to turn inside out? They ran tests, scans, cognitive assessments. One specialist said, "You shouldn't even be alive, let alone lucid." Frankly, I don't know how to explain this. I smiled and whispered, "I do." I was discharged within a few days. No brain damage, no long-term injuries, just a strange, lingering vibration in my chest, like my heart wasn't beating just for me anymore. The first person I told was my wife, Megan. We sat on our back porch, the sun setting over the neighborhood we'd lived in for over 10 years. I told her everything. The accident, the tunnel, the scroll, the vision of May 2025. Her eyes didn't blink for 10 whole minutes. Then they filled with tears. "I believe you," she said. Not because I convinced her, not because she's easily persuaded, but because she looked into my face and saw something different. A light, a gravity, a knowing, something she hadn't seen before. But the rest of the world didn't take it so well. When I tried to share the message online through forums to my professional network, I was met with skepticism. Engineers I'd worked with for years said I must have had a neurological hallucination or that I was traumatized. Some called me delusional. One even said, "You're making a fool of yourself, Dan. You're not that guy." But I wasn't that guy anymore. In fact, I started to realize I had spent most of my life playing it safe, staying inside my knowledge, inside my intellect. I believed in systems, in data, in repeatable outcomes. And yet, the most real experience of my entire existence was something I couldn't measure, reproduce, or explain. And it shook me. I stopped working full-time. I began writing, speaking. I gave a talk at a local church, just a quiet evening service. I didn't expect more than 20 people to show up. There were 200. And by the time I finished telling them about Jesus, the scroll, and the 3 signs I had seen leading up to May 2025, there wasn't a dry eye in the place. People lined up to ask me more, not out of curiosity, but out of hunger. Some of them said they felt it too, this shift in the air, this unease in their spirit. But not all responses were welcoming. An old friend from college sent me a scathing email. "You sound like a cult leader," he wrote. "Jesus and planetary alignments? You're embarrassing yourself. Take it down before your kids have to read this someday." That hurt. But I also realized something crucial that night. This message wasn't about me being accepted. It was about people being awakened, even if it cost me relationship status or reputation. Jesus told me to warn them, and I would. A few weeks later, I was invited onto a podcast hosted by a Christian therapist. She wanted to talk about spiritual trauma, near-death experiences, and psychological integration. We spoke for almost 2 hours. I told my story with trembling conviction. And when the episode went live, the response was overwhelming. Hundreds of messages flooded in. Some hostile, yes, but many more from people saying, "I had a similar dream last year about darkness and silence before something huge happened. I've been feeling an urgency in my heart and didn't know why. Until now. Tell me what to do. How do I prepare?" That question haunted me. How do you prepare for a future so spiritual, so massive, that it can't be stopped? I returned to the scriptures. I fasted. I prayed like I hadn't in decades. And then the answer became clear. Jesus never told me to stockpile food or build bunkers. He told me to awaken hearts, to call people into relationship, to ask them one soul-searching question. If the lights went out tomorrow, would your soul have peace? It wasn't about fear. It was about alignment. By the start of 2024, I had given up my engineering license. I knew I had to go all in. I started a small group that met in our garage every Thursday night. At first, it was just 3 or 4 people. But within a month, we had standing room only engineers, teachers, mechanics, nurses, even a few pastors. They came because they were hungry for truth, for clarity, for peace in the middle of mounting global chaos. I didn't call it a church. We didn't pass around offering plates. We just read scripture, prayed, listened, shared dreams and visions, and people began changing. One man, a contractor, shared how he'd been having recurring dreams of strange clouds and trembling ground since 2019. A woman confessed she'd had a vision of 2 moons in the sky and didn't know what it meant. A teenager described a low hum that vibrated in her chest at night, even when everything was silent. And I remember what Jesus showed me. The veil is thinning. Many will feel it, but only a few will recognize it. So we pressed in. We started preparing, not like preppers, but like prophets. We cleaned out spiritual clutter. We reconciled broken relationships. We fasted. We forgave. We turned off the noise. We lit candles and prayed when the world around us screamed for chaos. And through it all, one phrase echoed louder and louder. May 2025. May 2025. May 2025. By the time spring 2025 arrived, I was a different man in every way. The garage meetings had grown into an underground movement. We didn't advertise. We didn't stream. but word of mouth spread like wildfire. It wasn't because of me. It was because something in the spirit realm was shifting, and people could feel it. And then it began. It started in small ways, weather patterns that made no meteorological sense, snow in places where summer had already begun, static in the sky that satellites couldn't explain. On April 12th, an entire flock of birds in rural Illinois dropped out of the sky without warning. No toxins, no diseases, just stillness. I remember what Jesus said, "The earth is not angry, it is awakening." Then came the skies. On April 19th, an amateur stargazer in Utah posted a photo of a moon, blood orange and veiled in something that looked like smoke, but no fires were nearby. The image went viral online. People said it looked like the moon was mourning. Others called it a glitch in the simulation. But I knew. I felt it in my bones. Sign one had arrived. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my backyard with Megan, and the air felt wrong. Too still, too silent. Even the crickets were quiet. We held hands as an unseen pressure pushed down on us, like the earth was bracing for impact. And then a whisper came in my spirit, "Watch the media next." Within 3 days, a major world news network glitched live on air. A broadcast from Berlin abruptly cut to black, and when it returned, the anchor was visibly shaken. She apologized, but didn't say why. That same week, several global leaders missed scheduled appearances without explanation. Theories flew. Health scares, internal coups, media censorship. But to those who had heard the message, sign two had begun. And the people who had laughed at me, some of them were suddenly texting, calling, asking if they could come to the meetings. One even said, "I don't know what's happening, Dan, but I can't stop dreaming of red skies and silence." Silence. That word lingered in my chest, because I knew what came next. Jesus had shown me a moment so still, so eerily quiet, that every part of creation would pause. It wouldn't be dramatic, not at first. No explosions, no earthquakes, just the sound of everything holding its breath. On the night of April 30th, it happened. I woke up at 3:17 a.m. There were no sirens, no wind, no sounds from the neighborhood. Even our dog, Jasper, didn't stir. I stepped outside and was met by a void of sound so absolute, it felt holy and terrifying at the same time. Not a breeze, not a hum, not a single bird. Even the air refused to move. And then, as I looked up, I saw the stars moving. I don't mean they twinkled. I mean they shifted slowly, as if rearranging themselves into a new pattern. I couldn't explain it scientifically, but my spirit recognized it instantly. Sign 3, the final sign before the change. I fell to my knees right there on the lawn and wept, not from fear, but from the overwhelming knowledge that Jesus wasn't just coming, he was already near. I remembered his words. Every soul will be given a moment to choose between trust and terror. Watch for the choice. It will be quiet but final. That morning, I called an emergency gathering. No time for flyers or messages. We just lit candles, opened the doors, and waited. By 5 p.m., over 300 people had arrived. Some crying, some silent, all of them carrying the weight of an invisible truth they didn't fully understand. But they felt it. We prayed. We repented. We laid down our pride, our titles, our divisions. Engineers hugged housewives. A pastor wept in the arms of man he once excommunicated. There were no denominations in that room, no politics, no theological debates, just souls preparing for something only heaven could explain. And in that moment, I understood why Jesus had shown me what he did, not to scare the world into submission, but to shake it awake, to call his children back before the door closed. Because whatever was coming in May, it wasn't just a change in weather, it was a spiritual reckoning. The moment May first arrived, everything changed. It wasn't an explosion. It wasn't a war. It was something deeper, quieter, more permanent. That morning, Megan and I sat in silence at the kitchen table. The air outside was warm, but it felt heavy, like we were underwater. Our son, Joshua, hadn't slept well. He kept waking up saying he heard whispers behind the stars. When he said that, I felt chills run down my spine. He was only 7. There's no way he could have known what I'd seen. I looked at my phone. The news was chaotic. Headlines flashed across every platform. Mass sightings of sky anomalies across 3 continents. Scientists baffled by global gravitational fluctuations. Whispers or winds. Strange sounds reported from Earth's atmosphere. But it wasn't just the science. It was people. My neighbor Tony, the one who mocked me for months, showed up at my doorstep shaking. He didn't say a word. He just held up his phone and showed me a video, a soft, eerie, trumpet-like sound echoing to the trees behind his house. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't natural. It was something else, something cosmic, spiritual. I took him inside. We prayed for the first time in 10 years. By May 5th, the signs were undeniable. A massive solar flare disrupted communications across Asia. Not a catastrophic blackout, but enough to force entire countries to switch to analog systems. Planes were grounded. Military channels went silent for hours. The official explanation was magnetic storm interference. But I remembered Jesus' words in the realm of light. You studied the sky with instruments. Now see it with the eyes of heaven. This wasn't interference. This was a divine trumpet, sounding not from metal, but from the very voice of creation itself. That night, I stood in our backyard and watched the sky shimmer, not sparkle, shimmer, as if it were alive. The stars didn't just twinkle. They vibrated. They pulsed in unison. It was as if they were breathing. And then it began. I felt it not in my body, but in my spirit. A wave, invisible yet undeniable. It moved across the land like a silent wind. I dropped to my knees without even thinking. Megan followed. Our son clung to her. And then everything stopped. No wind, no power, no phones, no electricity, nothing but silence and light. And that's when I heard it. His voice, not outside but within. It has begun. The separation of souls. I didn't know what it meant exactly, but in that moment I saw visions again, as I had in the afterlife. Jesus stood before the earth, arms outstretched. People all across the globe were being drawn into one of 2 groups, not by race or belief or wealth, but by the frequency of their hearts. Those filled with fear, hatred, or pride drifted into a fog that seemed to erase their identity. But those filled with repentance, compassion, and truth glowed, dimly at first, then brighter, until I could no longer tell where they ended and heaven began. And then I understood this wasn't judgment. It was clarity. The great choice, the fifth and final event, had begun. Each person would be given a moment, a window in time to choose. Fear or faith, division or love, earth or eternity. That week, every conversation felt like a crossroads. People called from across the country saying they couldn't sleep, saying they were having dreams of fire, of angels, of doors closing and opening. I told them the same thing. Don't be afraid, but don't wait. By May 10th, global leaders began issuing vague statements about restructuring, reevaluation, and new global ethics. It sounded polished, but I knew the truth. They had seen something too. Maybe not what I saw, maybe not Jesus himself, but they'd felt a shift. Some of them hardened, others softened. I remember one news anchor, usually cold and polished, breaking down live on air. She whispered through tears, "I don't know what's happening, but I know it's real, and I know we need God." That clip was taken down within an hour, but by then, it had already been seen by millions. In our small town, the lines blurred. Atheists prayed with pastors. Scientists hugged preachers. People stopped asking what denomination you were. They just asked, "Do you feel it too?" Yes, we all felt it. And the message was clear. Time was no longer infinite. Jesus was near, not in wrath, not in rage, but in love so fierce it would not tolerate deception any longer. I didn't sleep the night of May 11th, not from fear, but from the electricity in the air, the sense that the veil between heaven and earth had thinned to almost nothing. Every breath felt heavy with something eternal, like I was inhaling the edge of time itself. I found myself walking barefoot out to the old hill behind our house before the sun rose. I used to go there when I was a boy, long before I became a man of numbers, charts, and steel. Back then, I believed in things I couldn't see. Angels, miracles, truth. Somewhere along the line, that died, until I did, and came back with the truth burning in my bones. As I stood on that hill in the pre-dawn dark, I prayed, not for answers, not for signs, just for the strength to finish what Jesus asked of me. You must return. Speak what others are afraid to say. You will lose much, but gain eternity. The next day, I went live. It wasn't glamorous, just a live stream from my office. A Bible on one side, a hard hat on the other. My hand shook, but my heart didn't. "Hello," I said. "My name is Daniel Rourke. I'm a civil engineer. I'm a husband. I'm a father. And 6 years ago, I died." I told them everything. The tunnel, the light, the beings of energy, the voice of Jesus Christ, the scroll of time, the 5 events, each of them already beginning to unfold before our very eyes. I didn't speak with theatrics or theatrics, just raw, trembling truth, the way a man speaks when he's seen the other side and knows there's no room left for games. Then I paused, looked into the lens, and I said the final message he gave me to share. There is no more time to argue theology, no more time to split over rituals, no more room for pride in your version of truth. Jesus Christ is returning, not as an idea, not as a tradition, but as King. You are not being asked to be perfect. You are being invited to surrender. The video went viral. Millions watched. Some mocked. Some wept. I received threats. I received thank yous. But I wasn't interested in either. I only wanted to be faithful to the one who brought me back. By mid-May, the world was no longer recognizable, not because of destruction, but because of division, and not between nations, but between those who had awakened and those who refused to. Churches filled with those who had once abandoned them. Fields became places of worship. People knelt in alleyways, on subway platforms, even in corporate boardrooms. But it was a religion they were embracing. It was relationship. The veil had lifted, and people were seeing again. Then it happened. The final scene Jesus had shown me during my NDE on May 21st, the world stood still. No earthquakes, no fires, no war, just stillness. The air quieted, animals hid, the sky turned a muted gold, like dusk frozen in place. And then came the sound, not thunder, not trumpets, a low vibration that passed through every atom in my body. This is the moment, I heard him say again, where every soul must choose. People didn't panic. They listened. They felt. They wept. Some ran to church. Some ran to loved ones. Some ran to isolation. But in every heart, a gate opened. Some walked through into the light. Others turned away, holding tightly to their control, their cynicism, their rage. It wasn't a judgment cast by God. It was a revealing of the judgment already chosen in the hearts of men. After that day, things shifted, not instantly, but undeniably. Weather patterns began to normalize, but with an eerie, pregnant calm. Governments started reshuffling, many quietly removing corrupt leaders who retired or disappeared. People were less interested in politics and more interested in peace. Children began asking questions about Jesus without being taught his name. Dreams increased. So did miracles. As for me, I left my engineering firm. I wasn't called to build buildings anymore. I was called to build foundations in the soul. I now travel the country, not as a prophet, but as a witness to the mercy of God who interrupted my death, so I can help others live, not just physically, but eternally. If you're still watching, if you're still wondering, if something in your spirit has been tugging at you like a whisper you can't explain, this is your moment. You don't need a sign in the sky. You are the sign. Jesus is calling you. Not tomorrow. Now. If this story stirred something deep in your spirit, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. I choose the light. Let this be your public declaration. And if you're not ready yet, that's okay. But don't ignore the whisper in your heart. You were made for more. Like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who needs to remember that the future is still being written, and God wants you in it.